Hello, my name is Kurt Kempton, and today in this video I would like to share with you how CrewCal thinks. This video is going to cover 5 parts. The first part is going to be talking about how CrewCal is not a calendar. It's a calendar reader and understander. The second part will be how you set up a crew. And the third part will be how to set up shifts, people, and all of the final tidying up settings. Part 4 will be about how to see what CrewCal is thinking, and then part 5 is customer scheduling. So, with no further ado, what I'd like to do is first talk to you about what CrewCal is. So, to tell you what CrewCal is, first we need to understand what it is not. In your connections area, you can connect to different CRMs and schedulers and all sorts of different things that you may use to manage your crews. In this case, in this example, I'm going to be using Google Calendar. And I've hidden all of my calendars except for Fake Crew 1 and Fake Crew 2. Now, I also have SendJim turned on. That will have nothing to do with what we're talking about today. But the important thing to understand is that CrewCal is not a calendar. The calendar actually exists inside of, let's go back in here. The calendar actually exists inside of your Google Calendar or your CRM or whatever. So when you want to reference your calendar, you'll reference it here. Now, CrewCal is not what writes to these calendars. So when you schedule a job in ResponsiBid, CrewCal is not what puts these jobs in. CrewCal is just going to read the calendar, figure out what a good optimal time is, and then give a hint back to ResponsiBid on how to, what date and time you're going to want to schedule it. So we'll talk more about that in a minute. So what you need to know is that ResponsiBid is the one who is going to be writing the jobs into your Google Calendar, and I'll show you how that works. The next thing is to understand that when we're talking about reading and writing to a calendar, it's really a good idea to think of it this way, is that when you hire a scheduler who goes in to find and make good suggestions on what to schedule, that person is not a calendar, and that person does not actually really represent any part of the scheduling process other than the logical part, the part where they're deciding where to put the person. So if I was looking at this from the perspective of how a real scheduler works, it would work like this. The calendar that you're using remains the calendar that you're using. The part where you try to figure out where to put the person you're scheduling goes, that is the CrewCal part. That's the part where the person is looking and saying, hey, look, here's an opening here. Oh, look, they're nearby each other. It's not that very far of a drive. This blue calendar has an availability in the morning and in the afternoon, but it'll only fit in the afternoon. That's CrewCal. The part where they click in here and make a new event, that is ResponsiBid. That's all the responsibilities divided up between 3 places: the calendar itself, the decision-making part, and then the actual scheduling part. We'll be getting into all 3 of those parts here in just a minute. Okay, so what you also need to know is that CrewCal doesn't look at your calendar as just a calendar view, because it only cares about your calendar in relationship to the person or job that it's trying to schedule. So if there is no calendar, there's no CrewCal. If there is no job to be scheduled, there is no CrewCal. If there are no crews, if there's no people to schedule and we don't know how fast those people can work and how far they're supposed to drive, there is no CrewCal. So all of those components all fit together to allow the logical part of CrewCal to work. Okay, so let's go into what CrewCal can do. So now that we say we have this, I just want to point out here that there's 2 calendars available to me that ResponsiBid can write to. Now, if I was using Jobber or if I was using Customer Factor, there would be some other interfaces, and you would have crews that would come in from different CRMs. Now, if you go into your CrewCal settings, you'll see that CrewCal, the 2 things that can be turned on in your CrewCal settings are, 1, your ability to schedule yourself. So by enabling the connection, you can now schedule as an admin. Actually you have to have it turned on in order for a customer to use it. The other part you can turn on is if you want CrewCal to be able to help your customer schedule. So this means that CrewCal will be helping you to schedule, and this means that it will be allowing your customer to self-schedule. It'll help them. Now, for the customers, there's much less power that they have. They only get to really choose the cream of the crop options. For you, really, it's just going to be a bunch of suggestions, and then you can do whatever you want. We'll be able to see that in a little bit as well. So, as far as CrewCal, there are a few other things I want to talk to you about in part one. The one is that once you've turned these items on, you'll now have the ability to set up your crews, and we'll talk about that in the next section. You'll be able to set up your shifts, which is what times of day your crews are out on the road. Then there's people, and then there's actual settings, the kind of tidying up portion, I call it. So that's it for part one. That's what CrewCal can do and what controls you have for it. And now what I'd like to do is go to part two. So for part two, I'd like to talk about what it takes to set up a crew. The first thing you'll notice is that I've already set up these crews. I'm going to show you how I did it, but you can see that there's really only 2 crews for me to pick from here. Now, as a side note, you can see that it's connected to Google Calendar Fake Crew 1, and I'm calling this Fake Crew 1. Now, I could call it Fake Crew 2 if I want, but that doesn't change the fact that we're writing, right here, this says we're writing to Fake Crew 1. So, naming these things differently as you can right here, that's great, but you want to make sure it stays in line. The second thing about, as you're looking at your crews, just keep in mind that if I was to deauthenticate my Google Calendar in my connections area that we were looking at earlier, if I was to turn this off and turn it back on, when I go into CrewCal, I would notice that I would have the old crews that I'd set up already, plus I would have new crews, Fake Crew 1 and Fake Crew 2. The important thing for you to understand there is that every time you disconnect and reconnect Google Calendar, or really any other calendar for that matter, we're given a specific token to stay in connection with that. And as soon as you deauthenticate it, this crew will no longer be able to be connected to that calendar anymore. Even though it'll still show here, you'll need to click in here, click delete, and then click delete again. And that's the only way that you'll be able to clear out your stuff. CrewCal doesn't get rid of crews for you because it still has valuable information in it for you, but it can be confusing because you're going to think that that crew is still connected when in fact it's been deauthenticated. And so here we talk about in Fake Crew 1, how do you go about setting this all up? So I already talked about reading and writing earlier. So this indicates that ResponsiBid is linked to this calendar already. So when you go to write a job and you choose this crew, this is where ResponsiBid is going to put it. And if we go back over to my Google Calendar, you'll see I have Fake Crew 1, Fake Crew 2. So the blue calendar here, if I schedule using this crew, Fake Crew 1, it's going to end up in my blue calendar. And the same goes for Fake Crew 2. Now, by default with Google Calendar, we still don't know where to read from. And I know that seems really weird, but the thing is that this is provided by ResponsiBid, but CrewCal needs to know where to read from. And in the case of Google Calendar, what you'll need to do is you'll need to go into your calendar, click into your settings, and then you can just click on where it says Integrate Calendar and go to where it says Secret Address in iCal format. Highlight all of that and then copy it, and then come back over here and paste that URL in here. It needs to be perfectly pasted in here. Once you've done that, now CrewCal can read the calendar, and it'll check it every 3 minutes by default. And it will be able to write to that calendar. If the link I put in here is the wrong link, and I'm reading from one calendar and writing to another, that will be very confusing and very unhelpful. So you want to make sure you do it. If you're using customer factor, this will be here by default. Do not delete it because customer factor is the one who provided that for your CrewCal, and it comes right over immediately on its own. If you're using Jobber or Service Monster, go into the documentation area to figure out how to go about getting this iCal URL. But once you put it in there, you are wired up. Things will now start working. But there's still some more settings. For the purposes of this, I am not going to talk about advanced settings. You can read in the read-only calendar. We talk about that in the documentation area. But what I want to start with now is the address. So first we need to teach CrewCal where this crew starts and ends each day, what time zone they're in. Without these two pieces of information, you'll be very sad that CrewCal won't know what to do because it doesn't know where you're coming from. So you need to have the place you start and what time zone you're in. Those are very important. The next part is preferred driving distance and max driving distance. So when you set up your preferred driving distance, you can see that I said that I would prefer all of my jobs to be within 10 miles of each other or 20 minutes of driving. So if something is 11 miles away or if it's 21 minutes away, it will not be considered a preferred driving distance. So when CrewCal starts scanning your calendar, if something is less than 10 miles and it's less than 20 minutes, then it will give it a green pin. That'll make more sense in a minute. But as you're setting up your preferred driving distance, make sure that you don't say, I want to go 1 mile or 45 minutes. Because if you do that, 1 mile will almost always be shorter than 45 minutes. So therefore, it won't be able to be qualifying for that rule. So you want it to be big enough that it's reasonable, but small enough that it's still preferred. Now, anything that's over that, if it's over one or the other of these, now it's not preferred anymore. But if it's less than your max driving distance, which works exactly the same way, 20 miles or 45 minutes, then in that case, the job will become a yellow pin. It's further than your preferred driving distance, but not quite as far as your max driving distance. Those will get yellow pins. Anything that is either 21 miles or 46 minutes or further away will get a red pin. Okay, so that's how the driving distance works. Now, for customers to be able to schedule themselves, they will have to be less than this amount. They'll have to be less than 10 miles and less than 20 minutes in order for them to schedule themselves and choose a time to schedule. Now, that could be from other jobs or it could be from the starting location. But the next section is if a customer was going to schedule themselves, how far out do they have to schedule themselves? If you do it, the default is 0. That means that they could schedule themselves for this day. Like if you had an opening today, they could schedule themselves for today. I prefer to be able to have about 24 hours of time between the time a customer can schedule themselves and when they actually are scheduling themselves. So this gives you a little bit of buffer zone to know that a customer will never schedule themselves within 24 hours of the time they're scheduling. The next section I've already turned on for you, but if you have it off, you can just toggle it on. And this is a neat feature that allows you to say, I am fine with driving farther to my first job, but I'd like the rest of my jobs to anchor off of that. So let's say that you have an area you service that's about 25 miles away. So you put 30 miles, say I'm willing to drive 30 miles to my first job up to 45 minutes. So again, if it's 31 miles or 46 minutes, they can't schedule themselves as a first job of the day. But if your day is completely empty and a customer's scheduling themselves or you're looking at your calendar, then you'll see that even though normally a green pin only goes to someone who's 10 miles or 20 minutes away, that all of a sudden someone who's 29 miles or 44 minutes away all of a sudden shows up as a green pin. And that's because they're the first job of the day, and they'll become magnetized basically so that any other people out in that area when they schedule will sort of cluster around that person because they're the first job of the day. Now, the next section is where you set up your services and rates. Now, I've already gone through and done this, and these are fairly arbitrary, but there's some important things to understand is that number one, as you're selecting from the services, any services that you have had turned on will be available for you to choose from. So by not selecting any services here, you are ultimately telling CrewCal this crew cannot do these services. So in this case, tile cleaning, this crew can't do it. Can't do any of this stuff here. However, something that people often overlook is that custom items are often things that you're going to want to schedule as an admin. And in order for CrewCal to understand that a crew can do custom items, you need to put that in. And then once you've set up, and it's for each module, not for the entire service. So like if you do carpet cleaning by the square foot and you do carpet cleaning by the room, then you need to have both of those in here so that this crew can see that it does it. Then what you need to do is assign the rates. Now by assigning the rates here, what we're doing is we're saying that if there's only one person on the crew and they're doing a house wash, they'll do it at $100 an hour. However, if there's two people on a crew at a given moment, then they will do $100 an hour plus an additional $100 per hour. However, if there's three people on the crew, there'll be $100 for the first person, $100 for the second person, and a third $100 for that third person. Now that all makes easy sense because they're all the same amount. But in this case, it would be $100 for one person, it would be $175 for two people, and then for three people it would be $250. It would be 100 plus 75 plus 75. Now, you're probably thinking to yourself, well, how in the world does it know who's on this crew yet? We haven't gotten to that part yet, but it's important to say that when this truck is out, and a crew really does represent a truck or a van or a resource of some sort that's going out, and that's what you send to a job site, you need to be able to identify how fast, how many dollars per hour given each service module, how fast can they work when there's only one person, how fast can they go when I add an additional person or additional people to a particular crew. And you'll need to do that for every single one of your services, because leaving these at $0 an hour will essentially tell CrewCal they're way too slow and they just can't get any work done if someone selects that particular service for a job. So once you've done this, once you've done that, then we need to move on to the next part. And you'll want to, when you leave, you want to look here and say, is there anything else that this crew can do? And if they can't, that's fine. But just know that if someone tries to schedule a job that has dryer vent cleaning in it, this crew will not be considered because they can't do it. The last part is crew shifts. Now, when you first get here, there won't be any shifts to pick from because you haven't set up any shifts yet, which means that essentially this crew still can't be scheduled. But that's okay, because let's go to the next part. I want to first say, before I go to the next part though, that when you're done here, if you refresh the page, you should see that the crew's name is here. You should be able to see all the services, and you should be able to see what the base fee is for the first person, plus their additional helper rates. You should be able to see what shifts they're on, if they've been assigned a shift yet. The location, the address location, which should be the full address, and then whether or not it's enabled, which is done here. Now, if it's not enabled for scheduling, CrewCal won't consider this crew at all. So you want to have that turned on, and it's good to go. Okay, let's go to part 3, setting up shifts, people, and the final settings. So shifts, you can click here, you can add a shift, and when you're doing this, you can choose what days this shift goes and then what times of the day that shift goes. So let's say that for whatever reason, we're going to say Monday is meeting day. So Monday meetings. And we say that we only want this shift to apply to Mondays. And basically we meet at 8 a.m. as a company. We don't really actually get out to work until, let's say, 9:30. We leave the meeting at 9:30 and we work till 5. So I'm going to go ahead and create that shift, and you can see that on Mondays I have that meeting, and I'm going to take this weekday one and I'm going to get Mondays off of there because we start at 7 a.m. on Tuesday through Friday, but on Mondays we don't. So I'm going to go ahead and save that. And now you can see that I've got a weekend shift that works 9 to 1 on Sunday and Saturday. And you can see that on the weekdays, we got our Tuesday through Friday, and we have our Monday meetings. So once you've set up your shifts, then you'll want to go back over to your crews and you'll want to make sure that they're assigned all the applicable shifts. So in this case, I'm working on the weekday shift, but I also work on the Monday meetings after the meetings are over on Monday. So once I've done that, I'll go ahead and give Fake Crew 2. You can see that they work the weekend shift as well as the weekday shift and of course the Monday meeting shift. Okay, now what about our people? So our people get assigned to crews. So David and Hunter are both assigned to Fake Crew 1. Now of course you can click here and add people if you'd like, but when I add them, this is where we would go. It's an active crew member. We give them a name, and then we would say, all right, we work on Crew 1 from open to close, Fake Crew 1, open to close. Maybe another day I work on the other crew, but you can choose hours. So for example, let's say that for whatever reason, we'll go to Hunter here. Hunter only works on Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. And he's a college student, but let's say on Wednesday, he actually doesn't get to the actual job sites until, let's say, 3 o'clock. So at 3 o'clock he shows up. So Wednesday morning, David's all by himself, and then Wednesday he shows up 3 to close, and then Thursday and Friday he's there from open to close. Okay, so now CrewCal will now know when it tries to schedule, it'll be able to figure out jobs that even straddle times when Hunter would be there or not, but it's able to tell who is going to be on what crews on what day and how much of the day. So this is really powerful because the part where we set up the crews, now it knows that on Fake Crew 1, I've got David there all the time. And by the way, if you don't assign people to crews, CrewCal will always assume that there's at least one person on the crew. So by assigning one person to a crew, it doesn't really do that much, but it makes it so that when you have to add a second person to the crew, they will become, they'll start being able to work at the base rate plus an additional. So we know that on Monday and Tuesday and Wednesday in the mornings, we're only going to schedule to this amount. But as soon as Wednesday afternoons start rolling around or Thursday, Friday, now roof cleaning is not a $200 per hour job anymore. It's now a $325 per hour job on those days. And similarly, we have that same thing happening here. We have Crew 2, where Nina is there open to close, or open to 12 p.m. on Mondays. And then Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, she's there all the way to close. Now Sam comes open to close on Monday, but doesn't work on Tuesday, and works Wednesday, Thursday, but not Friday. So all of that sort of complicated stuff about when people are working, CrewCal just takes that like butter, no big deal. So now that we know all of that, when we go to schedule a job, CrewCal will understand how to do that. So it's okay if your shifts overlap, by the way. It doesn't particularly matter if a shift overlaps another shift. What does matter is that once all those shifts are sort of laid on top of each other for a particular crew that's assigned to those shifts, basically we're left with the canvas of what CrewCal will consider for scheduling. And that canvas may be filled with jobs already that you've scheduled previously, and CrewCal will notice that, and that's fine. But that's where it will find the white space that it's going to end up looking to see if it can schedule any jobs. So all of the other settings here is your ability for if a customer is trying to schedule themselves, now you can make it so that if there are no availabilities offered to the customer, you can customize this message, what they'll see. You can also make it so that they can schedule themselves no further than a certain number of days out. So in this case, a customer can't schedule themselves out more than 3 months away. So if you're already booked for 2 months, they'll really only be able to see options that are within, after those 2 months are, you start getting unlocked and seeing times, but they won't be able to schedule themselves out 4 months. So you have that ability to change that as well. The last thing is that if a customer tries to self-schedule and the system can't find an appointment, then you can make it so that the status either changes or doesn't change or whatever you decide, but your statuses will be in there, and you can actually make it so that those status changes will be something that you can pay attention to so that you'll know customers tried to schedule themselves but got this message here. Okay, so that is setting up your shifts, setting up your people, and setting up your final settings. So let's now go to part 4. This is where all of the magic happens. So I'm going to take this Johnny Ive customer, and I am going to look at this from the admin side. This is where we're going to talk about what is CrewCal thinking. So if I go to scheduled, now I need to select some services to be done. So I can see by default the customer already said that they wanted a roof cleaning done. So I'm going to go ahead and click schedule now. And you'll see now that we have yellow pins, we have green pins. We don't actually have any red pins on this calendar because those aren't very good recommendations anyway. But you can see that these different pins are going to represent different things. What it means is that this is a good driving distance. So green pin means it's in your preferred driving distance, and a yellow pin means it's not in your preferred driving distance, but it's not beyond your max. So if I hover over there, you can see it's 14.1 miles to get there and 15.4 miles to leave. So it's maybe not as good as something else where I'm driving maybe from my first location, but it's only a 3.7 mile drive to go to the next place. So I'm going to click in there and I'm going to look. And I'm going to see that it didn't actually recognize this driving distance, but it said that's okay because it's really close back to the office. And I can see the calendar there. You can see here, this was at 27 minutes. So I start the day. My job 1 is over here. Job 2 is over there. Doesn't look like we did a great job scheduling that. But for job 3, the one that we're actually looking, the red pin here, it's a 27 mile drive from job 2 and a 27 minute drive, 14.1 miles. And then to get back to the office is another 32 minutes. So not really a good recommendation. There's your yellow drive distance and there's your green drive distance. So I'm not really that satisfied with all of those, but I can see here that there's capacity bar colors. So what does that mean? You can see that the bars get longer as the day gets fuller, and you can also see that it's green when it's less than 80% full. So by choosing a green and a green opportunity, that means that we're not worried about a job growing on us because we still have 20% of our day at least left over, and we have good drive distance. Now in the case of yellow capacity bars, what that means is that the pin is telling me it's beyond your preferred driving distance and it's between 80 and 100% full for the day. That means that you're kind of worried at this point that, you know, if that job was to grow, if whatever job you're scheduling did grow, there might be a concern that you're not going to be able to fit it into the day the way you want it to. So you better know enough about this job to know. A customer wouldn't be given this opportunity, but you can top your days off with yellow jobs. A red capacity bar, as you might imagine, means someone's going to have to work overtime. Let's take a look at that one. So it's a 19-minute drive. I'm sorry, here's the recommendation. So it's a 23-minute drive, and it's only 10 minutes back to the office. There's the day there. So job 1, job 2, job 3, and then job 4, and you're back to the office. So in this case, you can see that I'm not going to finish until after 7 o'clock at night. My day is looking pretty full, not really liking that option. But this is a good opportunity. I can take that one, and I can see that I'm going to go out, I'm going to do job 1, I'm going to do job 2, and then it's not the optimal drive back to the office, but it was close enough to this job that it totally works. Now, that's all given my rules. If I was changing my rules, these pins would all change, and if I change my shifts, these capacities would start to change as well. It's also worth noting that a job that Crew 1 is doing on Monday would take from 12:25 to 5:20, right? But then when we look at Wednesday, it sort of straddles that time, so it's from 12:30 to 4:35, because we have that other crew member for half of that job, or more than half of that job. And then as we start moving on later on, you can see that a job that starts on Friday at 2 o'clock is going to be done at 5:25. So it's a much shorter job because it knows it's going to have that other crew member the whole time. A lot of intelligence going on here, and it's worth noting here as you look at this calendar, these green and greens are going to, when I show you how the customer scheduling goes, these are what's going to be available to the customer. Now you have a few different views here. You can look at it just in terms of a week and see all the recommendations for the week. The more crews you have, the more useful that view is. And then the other one you have is actually a list view. And by default, it'll show you the absolute best time to schedule a job is April 26th. That's when you'll have the least amount of drive time, and it fits wonderfully in the Fake Crew Tuesday. Now, you can go down this list, and this is your preferences. If you click on show by date, now it'll show the soonest opportunities, or this will show you, this is your preferences, and this is by date. So if a customer wants to get in sooner than later, you can kind of toggle it and start deciding which preferences you want to go through. So it's nice to be able to look and say, okay, this is my most optimal time to do it. Can you do it on April 26th? And if they say yes, you can just click on there. You can see the job, how it would fit. The other cool thing is that you as the admin can stretch or shrink. If you know something about this job that CrewCal doesn't understand, like, oh yeah, but this is a really easy job, we're going to be able to get it done sooner, then you can select that. So once you've taken an opportunity from CrewCal and you've decided this is what I want to do, the next thing you'll do is click confirm. Now when you confirm, this is where things shifted and you didn't even know it. So CrewCal gave you the good date and time of the appointment. In fact, if you click on this manually enter scheduled data, you can see that really all that happened was CrewCal sent back all of this information and it filled it out for ResponsiBid. When you click book it, CrewCal has absolutely nothing to do with the actual booking or work order making process. This is all done by ResponsiBid, and CrewCal doesn't know or understand or care about any of that. When I book this, in fact, I'm going to book it right now for April 26th. I'm going to go to my calendar, and I'm going to go back to the actual calendar, and I'm going to go to April 26th. And who did I just schedule? I just scheduled Johnny Ive. So when I go to April 26th and I refresh this page, there's Johnny Ive scheduled for the job. Drive time's already built in. Everything's great. ResponsiBid is the one who built all of that. ResponsiBid put all of this information in based on my Google Calendar settings, and it's good to go. It's ready to rock. But here's the thing. CrewCal doesn't know anything about it. The only reason it would know if I went to go schedule again is because it's going to read the calendar and find that job there because that's now on the calendar. But it's not because ResponsiBid put it on the calendar, and it's not because of any link ResponsiBid has. It only knows about that job specifically because every 3 minutes it'll go through and cache your calendar and understand it. So let's go ahead and let's move this job back to open. I'm going to refresh the page. You can see that it's unlinked. And now let's move to part 5. This is where your customer is able to schedule themselves. So let's say that the customer is looking at the job and they decide that they want to go with, actually we had the roof cleaning already. So if the customer wanted to schedule themselves for roof cleaning, they would be able to click confirm, sign off on the job, if you're using that feature. Oh, this is Johnny. And click schedule now. And when CrewCal gives the calendar, there is all your green and green opportunities. Okay? So they're not looking at the crews, they're not seeing anything that's yellow or anything like that. And also notice that April 17th, you see this block right here in the middle, this is the dates it's showing me. But let's say we go back to the quote, and let's say that we decide to do a gutter whitening for $320, and then they go to the next step. And then they decide that they have a $1,200 and $1,300 job, and Johnny signs again. Now notice that the times are different. And that's because now the job is bigger and now it probably wouldn't fit as well. And so now that might have changed to a yellow capacity bar. And so all those yellow capacity bars shifted away and they're gone. They can just go through, find the date and time, works for them, and put themselves into the calendar as they want. So I'm going to choose May 16th. I'm going to confirm the job. Customer is now scheduled. Let's go back over to Johnny Ive. You can see that Johnny Ive is now scheduled, and you can see it's synced with Google Calendar. Here's the stuff that the customer chose. Here's their signature. And if we were to look at the calendar for April 18th, and we refresh the page, oops. There's the Johnny Ive job right there, right in the morning. It's a good drive distance there. It fit perfectly, and Johnny Ive is now scheduled. All right, and so with all of that, you are basically a PhD now in CrewCal setup, how it thinks, what it does. We know for a fact that with CrewCal, it takes time and energy to set up. And sometimes people even ask me, my gosh, by the time I've set this whole thing up, that's a lot of work. Well, keep in mind that what you're doing is you're arming CrewCal to do all the things that you do or an office manager or a scheduler does without even thinking about it. In fact, this will make it possible for you to have someone scheduling jobs or you to mindlessly be scheduling jobs and considering all the things that you would on your best day, doing math that you're probably not even able to do on the fly, but it does 10,000 calculations a second, and it makes it possible for someone who doesn't know your area, your crews, or even your business to be able to give bids and schedule as if they were a veteran scheduler and that they knew and were intimately familiar with your area. So we hope you love the functionality. We hope that you don't ever hesitate to chat with us in the in-app chat inside of Responsibid. If you ever have any questions, we're always happy to help, and we'll also be happy to walk you through whatever scenarios it is that you run into. But we think that the CrewCal and Responsibid combination is really a recipe for domination of your area and making your customer experience just so strong. So anyway, you can see that we've got a scheduled customer and they were able to do it themselves and sign off. And if you go into your connections area, you even have the ability to make it so that your customer, when they're using CrewCal, will be able to, you just put in your PayPal email account. You can say they have to leave a deposit for a certain percentage of the job or a flat dollar amount. And I mean, you are rocking and rolling. So happy Responsibidding, happy CrewCaling. We're super excited about all the capabilities that you have for automation and great customer experience. And we'll talk to you soon.